this video, we are going to learn how to do what I call a modified welt seam, which is very similar to a welt seam, but it's a little bit more alterable for future alterations, important when we're dealing with clothing that may need to be changed. So I want to show you side by side the modified welt with the welt. So you can see here, the top one is our welt seam and our bottom one is the modified welt. If we flip this over, we have what looks like an encased seam here, which it is. This is the welt. On the modified welt, we have what looks like the double row stitching, but we also then have a serge seam so that we can actually come back in here and change things. We're not trimming away any of the extra fabric that we would normally trim away in a welt seam. So how do we do this? When we're stitching this, you're going to stitch the seam together just like you would normally stitch a 5/8 seam allowance for a welt. Your right sides together, your wrong sides are the sides that you're stitching from, and you're going to stitch a 5/8 seam allowance. Then you're going to decide at this point, which direction is my welt seam need to be facing? Usually I would say to center back, but if you're dealing with the center back seam, you may have to choose whether it's going right or left. Once you've made that decision, I'm then going to press it over flat. And I've also then decided to serge this edge. So I've serged these two seams together. Now you don't have to serge them together. You could serge them independently, but they should both be pressed over to the same direction. This helps give the look of the welt from the exterior of the garment. But as you can see, we don't have to trim the under layer at all. So we're saving our seam allowance in case we ever needed to make this a larger size. So my last step for this, once I've pressed this over, I've serged my seam allowances together. I am now going to take a 1/4 inch stitch away from the first stitch line, stitching this all the way up. And that will give us that double row look that you see here. And that's what makes it look like a welt seam, because then when we flip this over, you can see we have that top stitch line that is a 1/4 inch away. We have our seam that we originally stitched, but we still have the choice to make this a larger size in the future if need be. So that is our modified welt.